she say?
She just Facebooked it to me. You should have it in your email.
Otherwise, Tuesday.
Understood. Otherwise, yeah. Okay. Understood.
I know.
The road, right?
Let's see if it comes through.
I'm not getting anything. Okay, we good? Are we live? Are we live? Okay. Good evening. Welcome to our City Council meetings this evening for Wednesday, April 12th. We are going to get started tonight with a Pledge of Allegiance by Jacob Russell, who was the captain, and we'll get into this in a minute, of the Mountain Ridge Hockey State Championship team. So, Jacob, if you'll just come up to the podium here.
Can everyone please rise? Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jacob. Okay, we're going to now go on to City Council comments and recognitions. Want me to do that?
It's there, but it's...
Okay, I'll go with we'll go with hockey first while you're doing that. Okay. So tonight, I love these. This, to me, I'll soapbox for just a second. I'm in the mood to soapbox a little bit tonight. I think for me, when I get up here in this chair sometimes, it's been a rough winter. We haven't filled enough potholes. We haven't plowed streets fast enough. And sometimes I think we lose sight of what we're truly doing up here, and it is serving our community. And I think that's why I love what we're doing right now, is recognizing some members of our community. And that's what this is really about, is the members, you boys that we're going to recognize tonight, that you're what make a community work, not us up here. It's truly, I love seeing what you're doing, how you've represented this community with pride. This is the kind of stuff keeps me grounded, reminds me of why I think we really do what we do. So with that being said, tonight we're going to recognize the Mountain Ridge Hockey Club, right? Am I saying that right? Mountain Ridge Hockey Club. So they recently won the state championship. And so we love celebrating state championships. So I'm going to read a few other things about their season here that they sent over to me. They finished the season with a record of 16-6-1. They started out 4-5. However, after Thanksgiving break, it clicked, and they finished the season strong at 12-1-1, including the playoffs. And they only lost one time since November 21st. Every player scored at least one goal and recorded one assist in the regular season. It's unbelievable. That's not easy. That's a big deal. Every player recorded at least 1 point during the playoffs. Goal Cassius Lejeune, am I saying that right? Did I say that right? Wow. Recorded the most playoff wins across the entire league. Out of all 29 teams, regular season stats, they were the 5th highest scoring team in UHSH. They were 6th in goal differential, and they were 5th lowest in penalty minutes. Other team accomplishments, this is only their 3rd season as a team, so to win state in your 3rd season is a big deal. They went 1-16 in the first season in 2021. That's unbelievable. That's probably a young team that grew together and learned to play together, and I love that. They won the D3 championship in their 2nd year in 2021 and 22. Then they won the D2 championships in the 3rd season, this year, 22-23. The first season, they only had 10 players. They started with 10 players. Now tripled the number to 30 players, and now have also been able to start a middle school team. Last summer, that included over 15 players who will be attending Mountain Ridge in the coming years. So that's a great feeder program that will feed into the future programs. I love that. Head coach Austin Van Amen was the coach of the year in 2021 and 21-22. Assistant coach by Reed Hunter, and assistant coach and trustee is Jason Dietrich. So, boys, we're privileged to have you here tonight. Congratulations. Come on up. We'd like to recognize you. Come on up. And boys, if you want to turn around here for a minute, we're going to give Coach, do you want to make a few comments about Trav? Anybody want to add anything? Captain, add anything about?
Yeah, just tremendous the way these guys responded from that first season, right? Going with one win and bouncing back to back-to-back years to be able to win and come together as a team and build a culture for all the future players. Tremendous, and to see the middle school program growing, everyone want to now play for Mountain Ridge, right? And people across the valley are looking and know who you guys are now, and it's incredible to see the growth, and it's been an honor to coach you guys. So.
Thank you, Coach. Can we see the cup? Where's the cup? You got it? Bring that cup up. It's got to be in the picture at least. We're going to do a picture.
They've been drinking out of it all week.
I love it. I love it. Okay, can we take a picture? We okay? Taking a picture?
Yeah, you just come up here and turn around the other way. That's for you. Oh my gosh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. I love it. It's more than $50 there. What's that? That's more than $50.
Not quite Mark Stanley's, but that's pretty impressive, man.
That's good. All right. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, and congratulations again. I'm going to keep this on. Like I said, this keeps me grounded, so I'm going to keep this on and keep it around. So thank you. It means a lot to me. I'm going to let you do it.
Oh, okay.
I'll let you do it.
Oh.
Okay. Our second recognition tonight, Teddy, I'll turn it to you.
Awesome, thanks, Mayor. So, Cardston, do you want to come up here? You can. So as he's coming up, I'm going to tell you a little about Cardston. I got to meet with him today. He received an outstanding youth award from Platinum Global. This is their 5th annual award. He got to go to Vegas and get this award. He did a couple of different things for it. He was a mathnasium whiz, and he's a bookworm. He's a walking encyclopedia. He's a pretty smart young man, and he's blushing now because his mom put this information out there. He loves his mom. He raises chickens, and he has a little micro farm at the house here in Harriman. He's a volunteer of United Nations Youth Volunteers and has been a Candy Bomber youth serving in a couple different capacities. So you gave blankets and clothing to a couple different organizations, and you were able to help those out. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, I went to St. George, and I went around to a few different places with my mom and my sister, and we gave clothes to them.
Awesome. And blankets and other bedding materials, even you helped an Eagle Scout project, and you helped other homeless organizations, and volunteered at an Arbor Day Foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it's amazing. You're 12 years old, is that right? Yeah, almost 13. It's just amazing to have youth in our community that go over and above what we expect of them sometimes, and volunteering. We met today for a good half hour and talked about City, what we do, and I told him we don't do a lot of things, but we had a great conversation, and all joking aside, but he wants to be more involved, and we talked about the youth
I
council.
was going to say, did
Yep.
you tell him?
Heck
about
yeah, we
the
did.
account?
We talked about getting involved in that and just staying involved and being volunteered. So he's awesome. He lives right close to the rodeo grounds, and I said, that's perfect. You can just walk over and be part of the rodeo and volunteer there and the town days and all that fun stuff. So yeah, we want to give you a big round of applause and congratulate you for being an awesome youth citizen of our community. Thanks, guys. Don't go too far. You're going to get a photo too, bud.
And bring your family up. Your family's going to be in this.
Can everybody see the camera? All right, 1, 2, 3.
You want us to take a picture for you since you're all there? Do you have a phone that you want to? Or, yeah, John can send it to you too. You're the picture guy.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. There we go.
Congratulations again to all you young men, and we appreciate you being here. I always say this at this time, you're welcome to stay. It gets a lot more boring after this, but you're welcome to stay, but you're also free to take off whenever you feel the need. So, but thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
You didn't have to tell that
Wait,
twice. So you're like,
the enticing part about it being boring didn't entice you to stay, or?
Okay, at this point, we're going to move on to item 5, which is public comment. Audience members may bring any item to the city council's attention. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes. State law prohibits the council from acting on items that do not appear on the agenda. Public comments for this meeting will also be conducted electronically. Any person interested in addressing the council may submit a comment by emailing recorder@harriman.org or by visiting harriman.org/agendas and minutes, where there is a link to fill out an online public comment form. Your statement will be incorporated into the public record. So at this point, if there are any public comment, you can come forward to this point. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item 6, city council reports. We'll start with Council Member Henderson.
Nothing as usual.
I should note as well that Councilman Henderson is joining online, so we have all of us here tonight. Teddy.
We had a sewer board meeting the end of last month, our regular monthly meeting. Nothing of significance. There was the changeover in administration for our general manager. That was his first meeting. The other general manager is now retired and taking a mission up in Alaska, so he's going to be enjoying that. We did go over our build out and our capacity and our annex area, and it looks like we're completely serving or going to be able to serve our full proposed annexation area with the look of what we're doing west of U-111 still. So that's still undecided at this time. But it does look like we will have capacity for those flows if needed to take that in. So that's it.
Okay, thank you, Teddy. Sherry.
I was at the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District Board meeting, just right before this meeting. Just some quick things. Obviously, we're having a great water year. We've had lots of snow water equivalents, so that's good. I've seen things about 201%. I've things about this is breaking records, but maybe I would just gauge that based on exactly what records and how long back have we gone. And I remember as a kid driving through the valley year after year and seeing the fence posts buried for many years. So be careful that we don't over-exaggerate some of the records that are being broken. But that being said, we're very, very grateful for the water that we've received this last winter. It gets us probably about halfway there. We have gone a significant amount of time without enough water. So even though we have a phenomenal year this year, it does not take us out of the drought. So it's really important that we be cautious on that, but be grateful for what we've received. Currently, Deer Creek and Jordanelle are releasing water right now, so just to make sure there's enough capacity for runoff. I know I was at the Riverton Council the other day, and they were asking questions about the drought, about runoff and concerns with floodings and things like that. And that's part of the plan, is that knowing the snow water level and understanding the runoff and things like that, so the reservoirs can be, we can have water released out of them before that snow melts, so that we can have capacity in reservoirs. So that plan is already enacted, and those things are happening right now. Utah Lake is going up. A few weeks ago, it was at 528,000 acre feet. Today, it's about 560,000 acre feet. So things are rising rather quickly. And when we have like 80-degree weather for a couple days in a row after, it snowed a gazillion feet a week ago. So it definitely comes down fast. So, but there are good plans in place. Obviously, there's going to be places that flood or localized flooding and things like that. But it's all part of water. Sometimes Mother Nature sends us a lot, and sometimes she doesn't. And that being said, there is absolutely no guarantee that she's going to do the same thing next year. So part of what we have is a drought committee that determines what level we're at on a drought. And so that committee has met just recently, and the voting was a little bit split. There was 8 people on that committee that felt like we could be at a level 0, which means there would be no restriction, and there was 7 people that thinks that we should stay at about level 1 because there's no guarantee about next year. Part of that messaging, sorry if I'm going too long.
You're fine.
Anyway, part of that messaging is, I'll tell you the messaging at level 0, which means that we would not say that there's any, that our water supply is good this year, or so the water supply availability. These are the messaging. The public response to the drought during the last 2 years has been incredible. Collectively, these significant water use reductions have been instrumental in avoiding more extreme economic and environmental consequences. Abundant snowpack from this winter has been beyond even our most optimistic projections. When this snow melts, it will provide much-needed relief by filling critical reservoirs and recharging aquifers. Nature is filling the reservoirs. Let's do our part to keep them full. Despite one winter of great snow, multiple years of drought are still impacting our water supply. Any water we save this year will put us in a stronger position next year and increase the opportunity to get more water to Great Salt Lake. Over the last 2 years, we've discovered that it takes much less water than previously thought to adequately meet our water needs. We still need to use only what is necessary. Make changes to your landscape to make it more sustainable for Utah's climate. Take advantage of higher incentives offered through Utah Water Savers. An additional messaging that will be a tag to that if we decide to go to level 1 would be, as we face the unpredictability of future drought conditions, it is crucial to acknowledge that a single strong winter will not negate the effects of multiple years of drought. To ensure the resilience of our water supply, we ask that the public maintain last year's water reduction efforts by decreasing overall water usage by 10% from typical levels. The board will decide next month which level we are on. I can tell you my inclination is to say level 1, because my concern is that if we go to level 0, the message it sends to the public will be, oh, we're out of a drought. And my fear is that we see a rebound of water use. And then we lose what we gain from having a really good water year. So just as the representative for Harriman on that, that would probably be the way that I would be inclined to vote. I don't know what the other board members will do, but that'll be my concern. We will be getting a 6.4% rate hike on our wholesale water rates this year. That is higher than the average is 5% across the board. Harriman's a little higher, and and I probably should send this to Justin separately, but our peaking factors are a little high, and so would you guys provide me some feedback on those peaking factors and help me understand why Harriman's higher than most of the other district on our peaking factors? Because that peaking factor drives rate increases. There's a huge rate study that goes into analyzing what our rates will be, and peaking factors is definitely one of those. So good news on water. It's great. There's been such a great response by the public. There is some really, really funny ads that will be joining you on Hulu or whatever, little funny ads, and they're probably short enough you can't skip the ads. So about grass doesn't belong anywhere. So if you see those on billboards or buses, they're pretty entertaining. One is a bus driver with grass all over the front window with a little tiny hole he can look out and says, grass doesn't belong anywhere. Anyway, they're pretty funny, but that is an ad campaign that will be started from messaging that we have to understand that grass is pretty, but it doesn't belong everywhere. So that's my report.
Thank you. Thank you, Sherry. Steve.
Just a quick update from the Mosquito Abatement District. Of course, this ties into the incredible amounts of water that we've had. They are forecasting some pretty exciting mosquito activity coming up. So they want to remind everybody to please go around your property, look for any pools of standing water, any buckets or bowls or pools, or even just natural occurring divots where there's standing water, to try and clear those out as often and as frequently as you can. That's where we seem to get the disease-carrying mosquitoes breeding in those, because our abatement does so well of keeping them out of all the other places. So if we can get residents to do that, that'll help keep the mosquito populations down this summer. One other thing is we did have a meeting with the Association of Municipal Councils yesterday, talking about some of the legislative updates, and it looks like there was speculation, let's put it this way because nothing's defined yet, but there's speculation that this interim session would bring about some of the legislation that we were happy didn't get passed last year, including some of the more controversial topics. We think they're going to be coming back in the interim. So we should be keeping our eyes open for those exciting developments coming. So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Quick report. I always fail to mention this stuff in the earlier comments or recognition, but thank you to our staff for the basket dash. Everybody that put that on and attended, that was hugely successful. I loved the change of format this year. I thought it was, Cohen loved it. So if Cohen loves it, you weren't there, but in person you weren't there. And then Transcom, I think it's an email to the council, but by way of the public, this is at the West Valley side of things, so I think it now has to go to the full Transcom, right? If I'm not correct, is that right, Bryce? But pretty much if it gets approved at this level, that kind of is assumed. But we were approved for some funding to widen 134th South between 6,400 and 6,800. No, 6,000. 6,000 west and 6,400 west. So we got some funding towards that. And then also to do a bike lane, a dedicated bike lane, the rest of the way on Rosecrest from 134th all the way up to Mountainview Corridor. So south 134th all the way up. So it'll be a dedicated bike lane all the way. That'll finish out that project. So again, hats off to our staff, that our staff does all the work on those grant requests, and so put us in a good position this year. Especially Bryce on that one. I will say Bryce on that one. And then lastly, yesterday I sat through the CDG. I'm not even going to read all these initials, but basically it's an affordable housing, other type of option grants that are out there. As a city right now, we contribute to the county level, right? But next year we are officially taking that away, and we've decided that we're going to still contract with, and Wendy, you can correct me if I'm wrong if I'm saying that, we're going to still contract with the county to kind of do some administrative side of things, but No longer will we go into the county pot. We'll just keep our own money funds local to the tune, and we think it'll be about 140,000-ish right now that we'll be able to keep in the, like this, it was, and it's nothing nefarious, but there's no projects even applied for that out in this area right now because we don't have homeless resource centers out here, but still there are funds we've talked about, not saying we will go this route, but we've talked about we could use it towards the SLIC, the old city hall and possible senior resource center type of, so you can use it towards that kind of thing. So that's an initial thought that we can apply that 140,000 towards something like that. I mean, we would decide that down the road, but that's an initial thought of what we could do.
We're going to talk about that a little bit more in the next council meeting as well.
Perfect. So still, it's just, so this was kind of our last one. It's kind of hard to sit through because we vote on something that just goes to basically downtown Salt Lake or Mid-Val. But now it's exciting to know we'll kind of have our own and be able to, and Antonio actually is our member that sits on that board now that represents Harriman, and so I appreciate your time on that too, Antonio. So, okay. Move on to item 8, the consent agenda. Look for either comments or a motion.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
Motion by Sherry,
Second.
second by Teddy. Steve?
Yes, but I want to make one comment again.
Again, okay. Sherry?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Okay. Steve?
Again, just in relation to the financial updates, great job. I love seeing it. It's so helpful. The content is great. I do look forward to hearing more of the action plan for the water funds that are insufficient and forecasting negative fund balances here at the end of the fiscal year. I'm also not necessarily anxious, but I think it's important that we continue to have discussions about our broader fund balance issues and their trends coming up and some of the things we might need to do about those things. So
Appreciate that. Thank you.
On Star Wars Day, I think that conversation's happening.
May the 4th.
yeah.
Okay, move on to item 9.1. Discussion and consideration of an ordinance updating cemetery rules and regulations. Anthony.
Good evening, Mayor Council. So back on February 22nd, we talked real briefly about some updates and plans that we have for the cemetery. We did go over some updates to the ordinances that were fairly minor, but I just wanted to recap those real quick with you guys before we look for a motion on those. As far as those updates go, we have added urn to the verbiage alongside casket or coffin in various locations. We added Juneteenth to the observed holiday list. We are wanting to prohibit confetti in the cemetery. We changed the visitation hours to start at 7 a.m. instead of 7:30 p.m. And that's to coincide with the rest of the park hours when we do the additional updates there with the park ordinances. Monument companies will no longer need to contact the Parks Department before setting a headstone because we will be implementing a fee there that they'll have to contact the recorder's office for that. And then we'll also be limiting the expansion area to flat headstones only, no upright headstones in that expansion area. So those were the brief updates we had on the ordinances. If there's any questions, I'm happy to address those now. Otherwise, we'll just look for a motion on those.
Any comments, questions on the changes?
No, I think that we obviously have discussed this in a work meeting, and you did a thorough job there explaining those things to us, and I appreciate the work.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 2023-05, approving an amendment to the Harriman City Cemetery Rules and Regulations.
Second.
Motion by Teddy, second by Sherry. Teddy?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And Jared?
Yes.
I'll vote yes, that motion carries. Okay, move on to item 9.2. Thank you, Anthony. 9.2, discussion and consideration of a proposed amended and restated master development agreement for Mountainview Plaza on 6 acres located at 12252 South Harriman Main Street in the C2 commercial zone. And we're going to start with Michael, and then he's going to hand off to Aaron.
Thank you. Yes, and because our applicant, our development partner, has their own presentation, I'll be brief. As the council knows, this is a topic that has appeared on your work session agenda a few times as we've been negotiating a new plan for this property that we had been calling or referring to as Game Point. And now the same development group is wanting to rebrand and reestablish a new development proposal called Mountainview Plaza. Approximate location, this is up around the Auto Mall that's been currently being developed just west of the highway. And this was a previous site plan that we saw as an iteration of the new idea, really focusing on retail, restaurant, and office use in this area. We most likely end up with a shared parking program. And a little closer look at that same site, you can see we're now starting to look at square footages of these different tenant spaces and specific users. And then we, under the council direction and also with the Planning Commission recommendation on this amendment, the Aaron Osmond and his group refined the site. You can see that we've now started to introduce a plaza right on the corner of Miller Crossing and Harriman Main Street. Trying to screen the dumpster locations. We've introduced some pedestrian connectivity through the middle of the parking lot and also some additional landscaping, as well as some plaza space that is in between buildings and in front of buildings. Another thing that was really quite creative of this group is they really wanted to have 2 drive-through opportunities, but we were concerned about having multiple drive-throughs and then limiting our ability to have outdoor seating. And so they have this kind of this serpentine shared drive-through pattern that I thought was really quite creative. It meets our stacking requirements. Again, this is just a conceptual plan that would be attached to the MDA, but it was a very creative solution, I think, that met their needs as well as our concerns with how the site might be developed over time. In your packet, we've included a number of images that would be attached to the MDA. These were some early concepts that this group has developed elsewhere in Utah. They're not building this exact same product, but this was kind of their experience and kind of their level of what they thought they would like to try and do here on this site. These are the newest elevations that they're proposing. And again, we're really trying to identify specific building elements, understanding that as the project goes from this point to building permit, we may see some variations, but at least we'll establish certain benchmarks. So we would anticipate seeing something equivalent to or better than what we're seeing attached to the MDA. Again, we also have a number of images to illustrate these outdoor gathering spaces. Initially, we had these conceptually with conversations with the council and the Planning Commission. But we asked the development partner if he'd be comfortable with adding some of these actually into the MDA, and so we did that in your packet into the draft MDA. So again, the number of these images you've already seen. These were the recommendations from the Planning Commission. Again, you've asked the development partner to make adjustments to their plans, largely implementing these recommendations from the Planning Commission, which they have done. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or turn the time over to Aaron's group.
Any questions for Michael now, or should we hold off and should we see the presentation and then we can come back if we need to? Okay. Aaron, come on forward. Appreciate you being here tonight.
Your PowerPoint. Okay, sounds great. Well, while they're pulling up that PowerPoint, I just want to take a moment and thank the staff. It's been really a phenomenal experience from a developer perspective. We've had great interaction with Michael and Clinton and with Blake and team, and lots of really positive back and forth as we've tried to work through this plan. So I just want to articulate that right up front, how much we've appreciated. Let's go ahead to the next slide. What we really wanted to show you today was the latest version of our site plan, a look at the latest elevations across buildings 1 through 6. We have that now, and we can show that detail to you tonight. I'm going to have Chris with Leighton Davis Architects come up and kind of go through the approach from a design perspective, both with the site plan and also with our elevations and design strategy and some of our materials. You see some of that reflected in the actual design requirements component of the MDA. We've reflected that and provided that content and reviewed that with staff as well before submission. So we feel pretty excited about where we're at with this project. One thing I wanted to just ask the council's advice from perspective of what I want to talk about tonight. This is the first public meeting we've had about this development in some time. And I just wanted to ask, do you want me to explain what had happened and where we were with the Game Point project, or just leave it at this Mountainview Plaza conversation this evening? What's your guidance?
Let's just make sure. You're sure you don't want to do the Game Point?
Oh, we would rather do that.
Okay, I mean, there's still time. I'm just saying.
I know that there have been citizens that have asked about this project in the past, and I just want to be transparent about it, that, we intended to build a family fun center for the people of Harriman. And due to economic realities and conditions associated with COVID, we were unable to do so. And then since that time, other developments have moved in that made it economically impossible for us to build a facility of that size and scope and be profitable. We're super disappointed about it. However, with this new project, our intent in partnership with staff and council is to create an environment that is still a destination location for the city of Harriman, where we can have restaurant and entertainment use. We're trying to attract tenants that will come to this location, that will provide things like indoor mini golf and axe throwing and fun activities like that, plus compelling restaurant solutions that the city really needs to create that sense of community and a place to come and gather. We're very confident that the spirit of what we're trying to build is still going to create a community destination, and that's the intent behind this project. And I just wanted to have that on record for the citizens of Harriman.
Perfect.
Any questions about that from the council?
Thanks, Aaron.
Okay. So I don't know if you have any specific questions for me as the developer before I have Chris come up and just talk about the design plan. Is there anything specifically about the project you would like to ask me now that you've had a chance to look at the materials?
No, I love the changes. I'll just say I love the changes. I love the creativity of the double drive-through and I love if we can still, that office complex where it's that curvy, the curve.
I know, it's super
really
cool.
cool.
That entryway is going to really look nice for that area.
When I drove by Jared's project in
Yeah, did you?
Saratoga
Good.
yesterday,
Same,
there's just nothing, truly, there's nothing like that here right now, so.
Yeah, we're excited, and we're really proud of our partnership with Chris and his team. These design elements and that creativity that Michael talked about is the direct result of his team's work, trying to find a solution per staff's recommendations. So let me invite up Chris Layton right now and let him explain a little bit more about the project.
Thanks for having us.
Welcome, Chris.
It's not often that we get to present our architecture to city councils. We usually get cut off by the planning commission, and they take care of us. They know what they're doing. And having said that, I've got to reiterate how we work all over the West, really, and it's rare that you get an opportunity to work hand in hand with community development and planning members, which we understand is because there's significant interest in this project. This is a very key location, and it really needs to be done right, and it needs to be done the way the city wants it to be done, not just the way we think it would look best and perhaps be the most profitable. So having that choice when you're a design professional to decide what does this really want to be. We really had an advantage because we knew a lot about what many of you want it to be. If we went to the first slide, I believe, Mike mentioned this most recent site plan. It shows the effort of kind of creating a village that wraps around, and it's not just a single-sided village. It's a village that's as provocative from the streets side as from the parking side. The shops have glazing on all four sides. They're 360-degree architectural experiences. They're paired up, and this is kind of where the concept of what you'll see in these drawings, and I'll try to keep it short and sweet, is that there's a lot about architecture and building design that's very human-like. The skeletal frame, the skin, the composition, the colors. We wanted to make this and these buildings really be a family. And that's why instead of them being very eclectic and very different, we chose to take certain genetic markers, if you will, and you'll see them repeated in different ways, but every building's different, just as each member of a family is different. But yet their energy from being next to each other is what will make this architectural experience compelling and want people to come there. So I think we'll be able to move through these. You can look at them closer in your literature, but we paired up these buildings. Buildings 1 and 2 are very nice restaurants, each one sharing an inner court between them of seating and dining on the street side as well as between in the courtyard. Next. These are retail buildings. They don't have drive-throughs. They may or may not have food users in them, but they'll be, shopping is a really great form of entertainment. This building, Building 3, fronts the courtyard, and we didn't really speak a lot about that, but that corner, and again, without the vision of the city through the planning department, we may not have come up with that all on our lonesome. So we acknowledge and welcome the interaction and dialogue we've had. So there's going to be a lot of energy emanating from this corner, and that these buildings link to. Next slide. Little bit smaller, a little bit more boutique. Both of these buildings have the opportunity for drive-through convenience, but we hope that we've come up with a way to do it where the impact of the pedestrian way is not a detriment. Let's see what we have next. The office building is kind of the family member that's 50 paces behind, but I think a real key component to this is the commercial activity, and with all of these buildings and retail opportunities, I think office space, as this evolves, is going to really be a nice member of the family. Next. This kind of gives you a feel for the scale and kind of the warmth. Again, in the conversation about the analogy to aesthetics and skin and kind of a family genetic marker, we also feel like it's important that the buildings are a backdrop, that they're not trying to be the most important thing. The people are the most important thing. The products are the most important thing. The food is the most important thing. So keeping this color palette kind of a monochromatic, if we could move on. That's a little bit broader look at it. Not sure about why our renderers think you have a 6-story high-rise there, but...
Well, they're coming. They'll just be a little bit further up the road.
That's in the future, I'm sure. Next.
That's 2040, yeah.
And that's, looking up Miller Crossing. Go ahead. And then the other from Harriman, Maine. And I think we've got a little bit tighter shot next. Yeah, kind of a typical plaza. And as I said, when we go through a process like this, we see materials, we see them on the building and go, that's a little darker than it really ought to be. So I appreciate what Mike said about this evolving, provided that it never devolves, that it's always increasing in quality and better coloration and so forth. So I think that might be, Yeah, another one looking at the front side of the restaurant. So it's odd that this early in the design process that we're showing renditions of this, but it just speaks to how important this project is to all of us, and we know it is to you. And we really appreciate all the direction and support, and we really want to do Harriman City proud with this development. So thanks for your time and for allowing me the opportunity to explain it a bit. Aaron?
Awesome. Chris, you can definitely tell you're passionate about what you do for work, and being on this project is awesome. And I mean, talking about family and DNA and connectivity, it's just, yeah, it's awesome.
You had me like hooked. You were like, that story you told was just unbelievable. Anyways,
That's in the Superdome's in the background too, it looks like.
That's right. We got it ready. We know it's coming. Let's go to the next slides here. I want to talk about tenants real quick, that we are, our partnership with Collier is developing and continuing to grow. We just found out from Alexis, who's on the team, that Brandon Fugel is now going to help represent this project.
wow.
And so he's very excited about it. The Collier team is very excited about it. They can't wait to get going on it. As soon as we have approval, we're going to be really aggressively expanding our marketing and visibility. Signage will be much bigger, visibility to the project, and the marketing of the project will go statewide. So it's really, it's brought a lot of energy. We have organizations like True Religion down in Utah Valley. If any of you have been down there to eat there, you know what the kind of quality that we're talking about. Pancake House, Boba Bee, and others that have expressed interest already. We already have an offer from Boba Bee to come into our facility, and then we haven't got it approved yet. So there's a lot of energy that's building around this. So I just want to give that assurance to the council that we're not waiting. There's a lot of energy going into the marketing and development behind the scenes from a real estate perspective. I want to thank Alexis and the Collier team for all they're doing to help us. And then the last thing I want to say is that we're ready to get started. If there are any issues in the MDA, anything that you want to talk about this evening that needs to be resolved, happy to do that. We're hoping for approval this evening to proceed with the new MDA and get this thing started. With that, back to you, council.
Any comments? Oh, Wendy has a comment.
I have a clarifying question
Yeah.
about the MDA. And just whether it's Mountain View one word or it's two words, we just want to be consistent.
I have it as one word in our documentation, so if we can be consistent in that, that'd be great.
What's on the deed?
Yeah, correct.
One word, Mountainview Plaza. One word, Mountain View.
One word.
Okay, that's good to know. Aaron, hats off to you. I will say that, hats off to you. I mean, for working with us, I think you've been a great partner too. You're bringing in some players that are making it, I mean, it's been, I mean, I think it's exactly what, I mean, I can only speak for me, but I think it's exactly what we kind of asked for, when I was sitting in our meetings, our work meetings, trying to lay out what we were expecting, I think this for me is spot on, so.
Awesome. Other feedback?
Same, good job. I just really hope some of these good ones come.
Yeah.
I've had some pushback from a couple of residents about the drive-throughs. They're concerned that there's going to be a Burger King and a McDonald's next to each other right there. And so, I'm glad that, not that I have any problem with Burger King and McDonald's, but I'm glad that they're not necessarily on this.
No, that's definitely not the feeling we're trying to create for this development. We're looking for bespoke and creative brands that will really make it unique. We're not looking for a fast, we already have that in effect to the north, and we don't need that again. And I think that's the spirit of what we're trying to bring to this.
Yeah, and I believe that, so thank you for that.
You bet.
Love it.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to, sorry, Todd. The drive-through the Saratoga property, and it just similar architecture, similar roof structures, and it's pretty awesome to see that across from the street. You got the fast food industry over there, and it's totally different products and different makeup. And having these partnerships already in place from past developments just puts you way above. And so,
We're excited about that too. Thank you, council.
Todd?
I just have a couple comments. One, the new designs, which I think look great, but we would, if it's okay with the developer, to include it in the MDA as a part of the depictions that are in there. And then the term of the agreement, originally we had a period of 2 years, and I think that's just too short, and I would say that maybe 10 years would be more appropriate for this project. So just if you do move forward with the MDA, to make those two clarifications in your motion.
So I have a little bit of concern with 10 years versus 2. Help me understand why you say 10.
So most MDAs are between 10 and 20 years, and it provides some surety for the developer. They already have some deadlines within the agreement as far as building permits, which indicates that they're willing to move forward with the project. It gives the city some assurances, but also the uses are going to be restricted for the next 10 years based on what's listed in the MDA. As soon as the MDA goes away, the uses would be considered whatever that zone allows for. So extending the term, I think, would be appropriate, given the negotiations that we've had regarding the uses.
Totally
In addition to the
understand
design standards, they would also disappear.
Yes.
after
Are
the
you okay
2
with
years.
that?
Yeah, we have no problem with it. In fact, we actually find it as an advantage to us. It keeps the purity of that project long-term,
Yeah.
what we're trying to do there. And it is possible that elements of this project could be sold to other developers, so having that govern the entire project is to our benefit as well.
Thank you. No,
Thank you.
thank you for
Thank you.
explaining
Yes.
that. That makes much more sense, and I agree with that.
Okay, I'll look for a motion. Let's get this thing going.
Would we have to list those in the motion, Jackie? Those 2 changes? Okay.
I think I got it.
You got it, Steve?
Motion to approve resolution number R17-2023, approving an amended and restated master development agreement for Mountainview Plaza, formerly known as Game Point, located at approximately 12252 South Harriman Main Street, with 2 caveats: that the MDA term be extended to 10 years, and that the design standards presented in the presentation tonight would be included as part of the master development agreement, as well as the other recommendations made by the Planning Commission.
Good with that? Good with that? Okay, motion by Steve,
Second?
second by Teddy. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. The motion carries. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, council, and for your patience for the last 3-4 years with us.
No,
Very
we-
much appreciated.
Can't wait to see where this goes. Chris, thank you for,
Go get them, guys.
look forward to having you as partners, so. Okay, we'll move on to item 9.3, discussion and consideration of an amendment to the city council's policy regarding public infrastructure districts. Blake?
Mr. Mayor, if I might,
Yes.
just one quick comment before that. I really appreciate the work that's gone into this, because I think it speaks to what can happen when you have a good developer working with good city planning, working with our development teams, talking to the council, and collaborating together, coming up with solutions, rather than saying it's our way or the highway from any of us. The end result speaks to the process that we went through, and I'm really excited about that. I think that should be encouraging for anybody that wants to develop in Harriman. We're here to work with you and come up with really great solutions, so thank you, guys.
I think it's going to speed up the process in the future, though, too. Like, if they come for building permits and processes, it's already set in stone, and
Yeah.
it's easier to get through, so, yeah.
Thank you, guys. Okay, Blake?
They're like the team from Mountain Ridge that was in here. The fun stuff's done now, so here we go. Okay, so we're going to talk about the PID policy amendment. We talked about this at last council work meeting and had made some amendments or some changes to the existing PID policy and are bringing it back here. So the first map shows where existing PIDs are located. And coincidentally, that is also the only location where PIDs are allowed in the current PID policy. So our current PID policy would not allow any new PIDs to be applied for by a developer. The original policy was adopted and included the auto mall, and then it was amended to, create an opportunity for Olympia to apply for a PID. And the purpose for the policy is obviously to allow some process for developers to apply for PIDs and some guidelines to review. Did that just disappear? Oh, it's just off on my screen, but it's still up here. Okay. But, and so as we go through this, the amendment summary that we have up here on the screen, basically the background on this is it requires more detail to be submitted by the developers as we go through the letter of intent stage and then city council review of the governing document. And then this also, let's see, I had another note here. I'm trying to remember what I'd written down. This was a key aspect to point out in this, is we added one clause in the MDA, or in the requirements, that if there are existing obligations that the city has, such as a reimbursement agreement for impact fees, if that infrastructure was built to service this area, that obligation needs to be satisfied with this PID. So we won't be putting the burden of satisfying pre-existing reimbursement agreements for impact fees on the back of the taxpayer. The PID will have to pay for that obligation, their, I don't know, their portion of it.
Do you have an example, Blake, of, I'm
So
trying
for
to wrap my head
example,
around
if you
that
were
one.
doing a PID down in the Rosecrest area, so to say, and there was a road that was constructed, like Juniper Crest, and we owed some money on it, and those obligations were in place, and a PID was developed up above on some other property, that we were anticipating those impact fees to pay into that reimbursement, then that PID would have to consider that portion, and they'd have to pay that in so that we wouldn't have to come up, try to figure out how to pay that money back later. That's the concept of it. We'll see how that works.
Because they would stop all future impact fees from coming in.
Yeah, the PID eliminates the opportunity to collect impact fees.
Collect the impact fees, so there won't be any revenue
would,
source to pay the obligation back.
if you didn't have that, the money would have to come from the taxpayer or some other mechanism, generally the taxpayer though. So that was one thing I wanted to point out. And so the recommendation from staff is to approve this proposed PID amendment. It kind of meets the requirements that were discussed with the council last time. And one key distinction is the city council still has full discretion on whether or not to allow a PID. This just allows PIDs to be applied for. They have to go through a process. The process is tighter now. They have more submittal requirements, and we get to see more of what their projects are, how much they cost. We specifically pointed out, Councilman Shields asked about soft costs and management fees, so we called that out in this amendment, that they need to line item those and show what they are and what they're for. And so this just allows for PIDs to be applied for. It doesn't require the council to
I was going to say,
approve them.
Blake, could Jared and I were talking this morning about this very issue, and I was going to ask Todd this tonight on the record too. So Jared kind of mentioned that he understands that possibly with a policy like this, if it's coming, like with this, if we approve a policy like this and somebody comes with a PID application, that we have to have very good reason to not approve it, or it could be litigated. Is that correct, Jared? Is that kind of, am I kind of?
Yeah, I mean, more or less that it's not a totally subjective thing. If we have a policy that says we allow it, we don't get to just say, no, we don't want it. We have to go through the process and have objective reasons why it doesn't fit our policy or purposes, etc. So just the notion that we can just say no, to me, is erroneous, right? Having the policy invites it and says, yes, we want to have them if it fits our purposes and criteria. And we have to, the burden is then on us, if we don't want to allow it, to have specific reasons why it doesn't fit under our policy. And that's not a bad thing. I just want to make sure we understand that that's what this is.
I'm not so sure that the city council has those same kind of, I just want to make this comment, is that when the planning commission reviews things, they have to just make a recommendation a recommendation or not recommend it, right? They have very specific rules and regulations for why and how they do things. As a city council, we have much more latitude in the decisions we make and the votes we have. And we have the ability to say, I don't like it, as a reason for our vote. I don't think we have to justify.
Well, that's why I wanted legal.
Any of that. So
I wanted legal to chime
really
in on
want to
that.
understand that.
Yeah, Todd, can you help us with that at all?
Let me review the language real quick and I'll.
Okay.
In a minute.
Okay, sorry. So we'll come back to that then. Is that okay? Is that okay, Jared? We come back to that in a minute?
Yeah, if I could just elaborate a little bit, Steve, to clarify, what I'm saying is that, yes, we can say no, but the potential litigation is you have to prove, right, we'll sue you, and the judge gets to decide whether you're justified in saying no because you have this policy that says we can if we meet all these requirements. So that's the only point that I want to make, is that having the policy means we go through the process just as we've been counseled before. When we make our decisions, we need to state the reasons we're making that decision, right? Because there's always a way for that decision to be appealed.
Okay. Anything else, or were you done?
Nope, that was it. That was the recommendation, and waiting on Todd's.
Hurry up.
I can answer any other questions that anyone has.
I think it's always good practice to always state reason why you're voting a certain way. And I think if there's any ambiguity, there is discretion in the council on whether to move forward with the project or not. But to Jared's point, I think that if a developer is really passionate about challenging it, yes, they can always sue. The likelihood of them winning on a legislative item is fairly limited. So you just have to have a, what's the right phrase that the court uses, a debatable reason on why you deny something. That's the same standard that you use for any legislative decision like a rezone. As long as it can be debatable, the court's going to give that discretion up to the council and rely on the council's weighing of what you heard or what was presented to you.
Okay, thank you, Blake. Okay, any comments, questions on this? I'll just say quick, I think the presentation before in the work meeting opened my eyes even more, that I think it's important we have this tool in our, I think it's just adding a tool to our tool bag right now to our, as far as what we can use. So that's, and I think I like the requirements we put in there. It's not going to be just, I think we're protected with the language we put in this policy. So that's just my 2 cents.
Hey, will you go back a slide? Another one? There you go. So sometimes I just have to think about things weirdly. So here goes my brain. I think about medication. When there's a new medication out and it's released to people, or not even if it's new, but if it's new to you, there's a list of side effects or potential hazards, because medication has to go through a lot before it's approved, right? The PID policy, sorry, it didn't have to go through a lot before it was approved. There were some big holes in it, okay? And so, in my opinion, it's the case study of studying a medication that's being asked for someone to take. And so we're still in the process of understanding side effects of the PID policy. So I believe that the originally adopted thing on May 27th of 2020 was very, very limited. And I think it was for a very good reason and very good purpose, because I think that if you just say, let's dump this medication on the whole population and see how it affects everybody, I think that's bad decision making. And then we looked at it again when Olympia came and they wanted to do the PID there, and some of the hesitations we had initially, we discussed those and decided, well, maybe we could try it a little bit broader sample. So I think that the process of this PID policy has been a good process. We still do not know the side effects of this PID policy. It's not been, I heard reports about all these cities who are doing it and everything. That's great, but it's not been in place long enough to understand any of the side effects. And then what happens is the people sitting up here, we get sued or in trouble because the side effects are bad and we made decisions that really negatively affect our city. Or we get championed because, oh good, it didn't have a side effect, so you guys did a good job. So the reason it has to go slowly is because of those things, just to understand the true impacts of this PID policy, because we simply still don't know. We assume, and we can look at things and think, oh, this makes sense. This is a great way to finance public infrastructure. And it might make sense, but there could be some significant implications down the road that we simply don't know. So I agree, I'm not opposed to the change now today to do the next step in understanding the PID policy. We open it up a little bit broader to a little bit more exposure and see how it affects us. But I do appreciate the last little tagline and the discussion about the the council having full disclosure. I think that that's a little broad. I think that just because there are people who are glad to sue us, that we still have a risk of exposure if we say no to someone or things like that. But I do believe that because of that, I believe that the way the policy has progressed and taken small baby steps is appropriate way to do it. There's my medication analogy.
I like it. Any other, Blake?
Just one thing, as I was talking with Jonathan Ward before he left, he was talking about one of the other cities, I think it was Salem. And he was saying that their governing document requirements require that the district send out a notice every July notifying every property owner within the PID that you're in a PID, here are who your board members are, and you get that a couple months before your tax notices come out. And it just lets everybody know. It's not the magic cure-all for making sure everybody knows, but the noticing. So that might be one thing as you make your motion, if you choose to make a motion tonight, to include that as well, just so people are notified in the PID as they move in.
And they know who to call when they're mad at tax.
It kind of helps them know who is governing the PID, yeah, not
That's a
who will
great
call us.
suggestion. I love that.
Okay, any other comments or ready for a motion?
Couple comments if I could, Mayor.
Yep.
Great discussion earlier in the work meeting. I apologize once again that I can't be there in person 4 weeks into the recovery from this horrible back surgery that at this point I wish I hadn't done. Hopefully when we get to the 8 to 10 week recovery mark, they tell me it will be better. But I think it's great discussion. And to me, the main thing that Jonathan pointed out was that you have to use a combination of these tools. There is no one size fits all. There is no best option, right? And I just want to make a few comments because I've been pretty vocally opposed to PID mill levies, right? Adding another property tax to people. The reality is, I'm okay. I'm good with this policy simply because of some of the wording that was added that was mentioned, right? Protects us with some of the other things. But allowing PIDs doesn't mean that we're not going to have more impact fees. PIDs only work in large areas where you can securitize the asset, right? If I have a 5-acre development, you're not doing a PID there. It's going to be the old-fashioned way, right? And that has to work with the PID. So that's why I like the policy and the wording that's there. And that might, to Sherry's point, we don't know that that's going to work perfectly. That might have to be adjusted in the future. Who knows? But it is another tool to use. The other part I don't like about the taxes is that it reduces the risk to the developer, which sometimes creates a moral hazard, right? Shifting the risk to another party and go all out. But at the same time, again, this can only apply to larger areas that actually can make the implementation of the infrastructure more efficient, effective, and competitive. And I think that's what we have an eye towards a couple of these areas. So those are just a few things, but I would just want to reiterate, it doesn't mean impact fees are going away. It doesn't mean that we aren't going to have other areas that we still have to look at these other options. This is just one more tool we can use in combination with those others. Right. That's it.
Perfect.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Yep, see another drug on the market. Good job.
But you want me to go into my metaphor of
No.
the density, and this is the next step?
Oh. Is this a bad time to talk about vaccinations? Okay, thank you, Jared. Look for any other comments or a motion then. Do we want to add that? I do agree we had to add that.
Yeah, both these areas don't have any residents currently, and is this going to go through another rendition in the next 1 or 2 years?
So I think if you wanted to add a notice in the policy, we would just require it in new PIDs going forward. Because you're talking about the policy right now.
Not the actual
When we talk about Olympia's governing document in the future, I think then you would do it. This would be for new PIDs going forward. We have existing PIDs. The only other, we have 8 PIDs, right? We have 7 in Olympia, which there's nobody in right now, which I think is part of your governing document discussion. You can say, hey, we want to add this notice requirement before you approve it. The other one is all commercial. You're not going to have any residents, so it's not in front of us to amend, so I don't know that you could put that requirement on them through this policy, but this would be any future PID, Public Infrastructure District application to create one, you would do that. So I actually think it's a great one. It wasn't in there. We spent a lot of time going through what was there and trying to tweak it, and glad that we were, if it had been in there, we probably would have put it, but didn't think about it, frankly.
Yeah,
I like it. Okay, anybody want to take it?
So I'll make a motion to approve resolution number R18-2023, amending the Public Infrastructure District policy. And in addition, we would like the language that Blake referred to in his comments for noticing.
You good with that, Jackie? Okay. Motion by Sherry?
Second.
Second by Teddy. Jared?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion carries. Thank you, Blake. 9.4, discussion and consideration of an amendment to the Olympia Master Development Agreement. Blake again.
Okay. We won't spend much time on this one presenting here because I think we've been through it a few times, but we'll get it up on the presentation here. We've got the location for Olympia, and then I've condensed it to a single slide, and these are all of the proposed amendments to the Master Development Agreement. And I think the first two are pretty self-explanatory. The third one we've just talked at length about, so this changes it to allow for a mill levy or some other option. They can apply and ask for something different than just the contract fee. Doesn't require that the council make the decision on approving it, but it allows them to ask for it. And then item number 4 is the removal of secondary water, which we have Jonathan and Justin from Engineering and Public Works to discuss that if you have further questions. Also the developers here if you have any other further questions on any of these items.
Okay, let's take this, let's do this one let's do line. Can we do this one by one? Just look through the council one by one. Any concerns about item 1?
No. Totally makes sense. We should put that in originally.
Yep.
Okay. Any concerns about item 2?
No, it's not effectual. It's really not effectual in my opinion.
Okay. Item 3, again, as Blake pointed out, just pointing to it, saying it's an option. They still have to go through a process, an application. Any concerns there? Okay. I don't think I'm going to get the same response on 4. Item 4.
Before I express any concern, I just want to ask a couple specifics. You gave us that report, the breakdown today of what the cost would be.
Wait, what report today?
The email that we got.
Oh, what time did you send the email?
It was like at 3:30.
So while I was in water board meetings, so I've not, just full disclosure, I've never seen the report.
Can we pull it up? Do you have it, John? Or do we?
Well, I could probably pull it up on my phone, but regardless, I've never had a second to disseminate any of the information.
And John did it. I mean, John did a really good job about summarizing. Jonathan did a good job about summarizing it real fast because it was a pretty big, and he summarized it.
You got it.
Just a few summarize your quick costs.
Yes. So what we did is we broke them down into alternatives of how we would connect to Olympia. And of course, there's 4 alternatives to choose from. And just quick little clarification is that all of these improvements that are on here are listed in the overall master plan. So at some point, these costs would anticipated to be incurred at some point until build out. But alternative 1 is essentially just making a connection. That being 1.58 million. So that connection is simply a connection no service would be able to be provided to Olympia. Alternative 2 is bringing in a transmission line from Black Ridge, and that would provide source for the surrounding areas as well as the Zone 3 for Olympia. That on its own is 8.23 million. Alternative 3 is essentially bringing in Zone 4 tank, or excuse me, installing a Zone 4 tank, and then bringing that to the Zone 4 for Olympia. That is 9.31 million. So you would be able to service Olympia zones 3 and 4 with those first 3 alternatives. That last alternative then would be needed at some point, regardless of which alternative you choose, as demand requires. I think that's probably the best summary I could think of right here.
Perfect. I was trying to forward it, but I'm
I
having
can
issues with the internet, so you may get it at some point tonight.
Well, I can see it on my phone, but I can tell you that there's no way I've had any opportunity now to look through this, and thank you for your summary, but
yeah,
I can tell you I would never make a vote on something that I've never had an opportunity to look at.
So my question in regards to this was, so correct me if I'm wrong, but Zone 3 could have connection and service for give or take 10 million.
Correct.
Okay. How many residences are anticipated using secondary water in Zone 3?
So for that improvement alone, if that connection was made, we would be able to provide for existing residents. And I think, so table 1, I'll take that back, it's not table 1. Thanks, Justin. I got my conscience behind me. Yeah, table 7.
They help us with all of our water modeling like this.
So yeah, so for the alternative 2, which would be bringing in water from Blackridge, you would get 4,787, or excuse me, that's the cost, but 1,700, excuse me, connections of new connections.
How many do you anticipate in Olympia?
And that is not.
So that could service 1,700. My question is, based on the current plans for the development of Zone 3, are there any residential properties that would be of sufficient size and lot size to use secondary water out there?
So that would be 0 service connections to Olympia, but that's by nature of the size of their lots. So 0 lots would be receiving services specific to lots. That would be all open space.
Are you telling me the plan was to pump water from Blackridge to there? That's the plan? Because that's not the plan that was discussed. The plan that was discussed was wells in the area. So this is all extremely confusing.
So yeah, so there are wells. So that 1.58 million to provide that connection includes connection with those wells.
Not Blackridge.
Not Blackridge.
Which is $8 million.
Correct.
So take that off.
So we can provide connection to Olympia, and I guess the thing that we just need to be aware about that connection is that when we connect it, it would not be able to, it would service the existing connections that exist today, and the source capacity for those wells could not exceed what the existing demand is, if that makes sense, for the Zone 3, for that connection.
Sure. So what's the existing demand for Zone 3? I guess I have huge fundamental issues with all this. First of all, you know my issue about it, having absolutely no opportunity to look at this. And I'm fine discussing it here, but I'm certainly not fine without being able to really understand it. I don't know, it feels a little vague or misleading, or I don't want to use incorrect terms, but it feels confusing and vague.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, yeah.
In regards to this Zone 3, it's been mentioned, is the 1,700 connections, are those existing residents that would be able to start using water if this were done in addition to the open space in Olympia Hills?
No, yes, excuse me, it would. It would service the 1,700 existing residents, but then a portion of the Zone 3 open space.
So I guess for me, one of the sticky parts of this is that making a decision for Olympia's, and that's really all we're talking about with Olympia, is the open space,
Yes.
could affect our existing plan to provide secondary for existing residents. Yes? No?
No.
Maybe?
No, the intent is we provide the master planned improvements to Olympia that would service Olympia, but we wouldn't want to shortchange the existing connections at Connection, if that makes sense.
I guess this is another thing that's difficult, is that when you try and break out something from a master plan, the secondary water is intended to be a master plan. So it's like, do we have a master plan or do we not have a master plan? Are we going to abide by the master plan or are we not going to abide by the master plan? Because if we're not going to abide by it, I'm sure that there's several other developers right up the street. I drove by Prairie Oaks Development. What do you see? Purple pipes along the road because that's what they're having to put in. And my guess is they're dry.
Yeah.
What's the plan to put water to them? But we're requiring that from them.
Right.
So why do we backtrack on what we're requiring of our city without adjusting the plan? It feels like picking winners and losers.
Well, I think that there's very different considerations. We're talking about an expense to provide water for how many acres of open space? Some parks and some open space. This will not be for any residential use at all.
But we already knew that and made that adjustment in the MDA. That's why they weren't required to do it through the whole thing. They're only required to do it a few places. They weren't required to do it in every zone. That was negotiated a year and a half ago.
But at the time it was negotiated, there wasn't an understanding of the costs.
I disagree with that. A year and a half ago, the costs have not gone up substantially in piping and things like that.
I never got a report on what it would cost.
Neither did I,
when we
but the
had any of that
developers
conversation.
certainly would have known that as they planned out that's part of due diligence when you plan a development, is to pencil it. And these guys are professionals. They don't not pencil their developments. So if they didn't pencil in secondary because they thought that they could come back and we wouldn't require it, then that's poor form on their end, not ours. It was negotiated, and we already made concessions on it. So that they didn't have to do
I'll just make two comments. Number one is that the presentation that we received a few weeks ago talking about the master plan for water showed over $60 million in cost based in 2012 dollars. So with inflation, I'm assuming it's probably at least double that cost. Based on the numbers from the 2012 numbers alone, our return to break even on the investment was 140 years. There's nothing this city should ever contemplate that has a 140-year return on an investment. That's obscene. And the fact that we are doing this in order to facilitate more water use at a lower cost is completely counterintuitive to anything having to do with water conservation. That is a complete misnomer, this idea that if we have secondary water, somehow we're saving water. We're not. We're using water. And we're facilitating a way to make it cheaper and for people to use more of it. As was reported in our last time, people who have secondary water use about 15% more water than people who use culinary water, because the difference in price between the culinary and the secondary is about 15%. There's nothing we should ever consider that takes $100 million out of our taxpayers' pockets to pay for something like this. Whatever was decided in the past, it was the wrong decision. And I think that I think we need to have a broader conversation about what we're gonna do for the city as a whole and how we're gonna move forward with the city as a whole. if we're going to make any changes for the city as a whole, if we're going to undo anything we've already done, that's a different discussion. As for tonight, the discussion related to Olympia, these costs, $20 million to provide service to nobody, is obscene to me. And I think it's something it's not hard to understand, and I don't think it's confusing at all. I think it's something we should absolutely not do.
Thank you for your comments, and I apologize if you think that I am retarded and have a hard time understanding that and confused, because that's not the case. The case is I've not had an opportunity to read it or look at it or disseminate it, period. It literally was sent to me during a water board meeting. I drove there. I guess I could have looked at it while I'm driving on the way here, but doesn't seem very responsible. I guess I could have looked at it during the work meeting, but that doesn't seem very responsible either. I've had zero opportunity to look at this report. As far as the report that was provided last time, quite frankly, it was very, very, very incomplete. So to say that that cost is what the residents were going to have and being impacted by that, that's simply not true. There was hose poked in a ton of that. Justin sat there and specifically said that none of that talked about the upsizing of the other pipes. There's costs that are associated with that were not included in that report that minimize some of the costs that were associated there. Now, I'm not going to argue with you as far as why, whether or not we should have a secondary water. Simply, it is the plan. Now, if it's a stupid plan and a plan that we shouldn't move forward with, then we should for sure have that discussion and fix that, which I've been saying for the last several meetings. It's like, look, if this is simply just way too it's not cost effective and the benefit doesn't outweigh the cost, yeah, we should redo that. And I think that we should look at that. And I've been asking for that information. Literally, we promised a month ago that we would get information back. We get it today at 3 o'clock, and I don't have a chance to even look at it or really understand what this is even saying, or understand if I even agree with it or want to ask more questions about it. Just because a report comes, I can have reports say anything I want reports to say. I can say, hey, Mr. Advisor, here's what I would like it to look like. Can you help me understand how that report can say that? Now, I'm not at all suggesting that that's what's done, but I am suggesting that if I'm going to have to vote on something, I need to have assurances personally that I understand it. So if you all feel good about this and you've had an opportunity to really look through this and you think that that's the way to go, that's why we take a vote. And everyone here has that prerogative. But I'm just telling you that I believe that if we have a master plan, and there had to been a lot of study and thought go into that master plan, if we're going to revert from that, then we should do it fairly. And I don't believe that we should say, this developer doesn't have to do it because he's here in front of us today. But everybody else who's developing right now today, I can drive you by on my way home and take you pictures and say, this development, tell me how soon Prairie Oaks is going to get charged. A long, long time if it happens, and a lot of money apparently if it happens, right? But we're requiring them to put it in. So I'm just saying that if we're going to make a change, let's do it, and we should do it quickly. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be expedient in our process of figuring this out, because then these guys can go ahead with their project. There's plenty of things that they can start trenching without. They can even buy pipe, and there's probably 1 billion people that will buy it from me. You might even get a markup on it. But I'm just simply saying that if we're not going to require them to do it, then we shouldn't be requiring everybody else to do it. First of all, I think it opens us up for a lawsuit. Because I know if I'm a developer, and I know today you guys get told, oh, you don't have to do it, I'm going to be knocking at the doorstep saying, why do I have to do it? Now, as far as watering nothing, I disagree with what you're saying. I do believe the Weber district has some good information about the reduction in water use when they put meters on secondary water. So I disagree. I believe that secondary has a role and it has a place. The question is, does it have a role and a place in Harriman? And I don't know that, Steve. I honestly don't know. And I honestly am open for that conversation, but I believe it has to be done with a lot a bigger opportunity to understand the facts that are associated with it.
Yeah, and I think that, I think I understand what you're saying, but I think there's two things. Number one is inside of an MDA, we have the ability to negotiate anything. We can make an agreement to us that has different design standards, has different street widths, has different landscaping, has different densities, has different all kinds of stuff. And this being decided inside of this specific MDA gives us the authority without any impact on any other decision or requirement in the city to make this change. I do think, though, that it invites a broader discussion for us to have on what would the impact be on the broader city. But that's, to your point, far more complicated than what this decision is.
Well, maybe, but we're making the decisions based off of the complicated math right here, so I don't know how it has to be that much more complicated. And I guess the other thing is you're right, we can do anything. We can say, I don't like the color purple, so you may not have that anywhere in your flowers, in your yard. We can do that. The question is, should we? And my pushback is, no, I don't think we should. Just because we can, I think it's outweighed by whether or not we should. I believe that we made good concessions when we were negotiating this MDA, and we made concessions to minimize. We're not making them put secondary water lines in every stitch of this development because it doesn't make sense. But what we did ask was to do to the things like parks and things like that, because secondary water does have a role. And there's no question about that. I'm not going to argue with you that if all the water goes away, secondary is going to get treated as culinary. I'm not arguing with that at all. But that's incumbent upon people like us, people sitting in planning departments all over, making sure that we don't allow that to happen. The legislature, sorry, this is probably going to sound rude, but in my opinion, have finally stepped up and are starting to make legislation that you didn't even have to have it in your master plan before, for heaven's sakes. And they're starting to realize that we have a problem with this. And so I believe that there's good progress on that. I believe that the legislature and local cities and towns will start really paying attention to water and making sure that our developments are much more water friendly and water wise, those types of things. So I don't foresee us getting to that point. It doesn't mean we won't, but I think that, and that being said, secondary does have a role to play because of the costs that's associated with treating it and things like that. It tends to be like Utah lake water. It's very expensive to treat that, but you can use it for irrigation. It makes sense for those types of things. Some of these wells, bless their hearts, but some of the groundwater here, because of we're next to a mine, sometimes it has some pretty rough stuff in it, right? But it still can work for yard water and things like that. So there can be a role, because we're not going to ship our well water. It's expensive to treat it, right? If we have to treat it here. Chemicals are through the roof, by the way, right now. But I just think that there's a role and there's a place. I don't disagree that gosh, we're just giving you cheaper water as secondary. It should be metered. And we should treat it just like the valuable resource it is, and it's water, right? But I think that we can curb usage and habits by good education and, quite frankly, rates.
Teddy?
So you both brought up some really good points. I think this is a bad symptom of a bad drug back in 2012 as a young city jumping into a $60 million idea of secondary water, of what we could have. And through the process, we've had setbacks or items where we haven't been able to proceed. I don't think it makes sense that every developer has to do it. I don't think it makes sense in this Olympia format from the presentations we've been in. We weren't in the negotiations 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. I don't know if it would have ended up any different if any of us were in there, right? But if we had the same proposal today to enter into a $140, $100, $200 million contract to put secondary water through the city, would we do it? I don't think we would. I don't think it's feasible. Do we continue with that policy? Maybe, maybe not. But with this, what's in front of us for the MDA, I don't think the cost outweighs the benefit to putting millions of dollars in the ground that may or may not be connected in the next 20 to 30 years of our timeline of secondary water through the city. I don't see that to get to that point. Philosophically, yes, secondary water is more beneficial. It's less expensive. It's better for the environment. It's easier to treat. But I don't think I personally don't think it fits this development. And if we're picking winners or losers, I don't know if that's a true fact, but I know that we have a policy that the developers have to follow, and in this MDA, we have that leeway and that discretion to change that. I mean, you look at the $1.5 million for 5,000, or that's the cost of connection. So what is that, 328 new connections in that area on one? That's a lot of money for 328 connections. And then all the way through. And this report did come in late, but I don't think it's new information to numbers and actual analytics, but I think we've had this information for months. It's not been in this detailed format, but I think from my point of view, I've seen the writing on the wall that it doesn't financially make sense for the city to enter into this, nor does it make sense for a developer to put that infrastructure in the ground to potentially someday be there, because we're doubling infrastructure costs up front. And that's kind of where I'm sitting on it.
Jared, did you want to make any comments?
Sure, why not? For me on this one, lots of good comments. Agree with almost everything. It's a matter of what do we do. To me, it kind of comes down to two fundamental issues. One is that we have a master plan for the city. And with everyone's comments and points for one side or the other, everyone has referred to that master plan and the $60 million number in 2012, and maybe that's not the right thing to do. So that's why we shouldn't do this. To me, that making this decision with that logic is making a policy change for this development. And it is, to me, that has big weight in my decision on the policy itself. Olympia Hills is a huge area. And this is the second issue, is we're not talking about charging lines to every home. That was already negotiated. They don't have to do any of that. They're not going to do any of that. What we have to decide is, do we want to pay for and have secondary water in the open space in Olympia Hills? That really fundamentally is what this is, right? It has nothing to do with anything else. It's the open space that essentially we're going to be responsible for. So do we want to hold them to the contract and have them put the pipes in for, in case one day we may or may not charge them? We don't know at this point, right? We haven't gone through that bigger discussion with our overall plan and policy. Can we do it? What are the areas that make sense to do it, right? So I have a hard time right now saying, yep, let's cut this out and not make them do it, and then we never have the opportunity to take advantage of those sources that we've told we have, the wells, etc., to charge those and use for the city parks in those areas, because that's really all it is. That's all we're talking about. Secondary water in Olympia Hills is the open spaces that 90% the city is responsible for. And then I agree that it is a math problem at that point, but I don't know that we're equipped to make that decision now. But if we don't make them put the pipes in, then we don't have the option to, and it sounds like that does have an effect on our overall plan for all the other areas that we're planning on providing it to. Whether that's the reduced cost, the shared cost of this project with those sources, maybe it's better, maybe it's worse. There's a lot of unknowns there for me.
Can I ask just one question, Jared? Because I think this is relevant to what your comment just made. Because I think, Jonathan, you said this earlier tonight, was that whether or not this is constructed for Olympia, adding this or not adding this doesn't impact service to any other areas outside of Olympia. Is that correct? Okay, so this is an independent decision from the rest of the city.
And that, to me, that's a huge part of this, right? If not providing the service here affects adjacent areas, then to me, that's a bigger policy discussion we need to have. If it really is just this area, and we can in good conscience make the decision that as a city, we don't want to have secondary water ever to our open spaces there because it's cost effective, I'm okay having that discussion and making that decision. But if it affects the overall plan and the plate and the areas we've already committed to, that's a bigger discussion.
I just wanted to clarify to make sure I'm giving the right information. So these numbers that we've provided here will provide service to Olympia and existing surrounding connections to Olympia as part of the cost. Nathan, maybe?
So I think the question, and correct me if I'm incorrect, is if you do not put the pipes to Olympia, does that foreclose being able to provide water to those areas that already exist?
Okay, got it.
And or will exist in the future.
That's right. So the answer was no. The only item I would say is that we would still need to construct the Zone 2 transmission line that goes through Olympia, and that would need to be provided. But otherwise, no, there's no adverse effect to saying
And we
that.
should state that's already 100% on the city. The Zone
Correct.
2 water line serves nothing in Olympia. It serves areas
That's
that are
correct.
downstream.
Yeah.
But it just goes through a street.
Yeah.
Going to Olympia. Got it.
I was just thinking about spending a couple of years on the broadband and how many times I sat and listened to, dang, we should have required people to put conduit in the road so we didn't have to dig this stuff up and go back through and do it. And in my opinion, this is all it is asking them to put the conduit in the road, because just because this is here, there might be other sources of secondary that can charge these lines in the future. There's a big development that's going to the west of us. There's water associated with some of that development. So I just feel like it's short-sighted not to just simply put the conduit in the road. And I felt like that was a fair trade-off by saying, just do it to the parks and the open spaces, because you're not going to use it the other spaces. I don't want you to waste money putting pipes in where it's never going to get used. But if we don't have the conduit in the road, AKA those purple pipes, it will never happen. It's just opportunity preservation to me. And as far as these studies go, and this will be back to your budget question that you're asked about, I sat through really long meetings and a very in-depth process with stormwater. And we came up with a plan. This is what it was going to cost us. This is how much money we need. This is how much the fees have to be. Da, da, da. And guess what? We're a shortfall on water, stormwater. So I struggle with that's why I need to understand this and analyze it further, because literally that was done. And then when I look at the reports for our finances, we're short on stormwater. So it's like, how did these reports fail? Is this report going to really tell us what we needed to do, or is it not? Anyway.
John, I would just say that I don't know that we've ever gotten a report and been looked 3 years down the road and go, man, we overestimated so much on what this was going to cost. I can't believe it's only 20% what we thought it was going to be. It's always more. The inflation on all this stuff just goes far beyond. And I guess that's my biggest concern, is that there's a philosophical discussion to be had about the water conservation impacts of secondary water. And making a decision for Olympia that might be a different decision than what we required at other places. But I would say that there's some other things about Olympia that we've done, that it's going to be the most water-wise development that we've done, right?
Job on that.
There's a lot about Olympia that's going to be really beneficial to water use. But the bottom line for me is it just comes down to, when you look at what a cost is versus the impact that we get there, that's really the bottom line justification for me, is there's not enough benefit for the cost that it is. And I'm assuming that these costs are going to end up being low.
Yeah, sure.
These are probably low from what it will end up being 3 or 5 or 8 years down the road when you're building Zone 4 tanks and all that kind of stuff. So And ultimately, that's really what the decision came. I think Jared pointed out, right, is that if we're talking about, you know, the obligations for just, for Olympia, we're requiring them to build something that really doesn't service very many residences. It's just for secondary water. It's for some open space, and it's a huge expense to service just some open space. And that's really where my fundamental objection to all this is.
And if I could say, that's kind of where I'm at too. I mean, that's just, I mean, I haven't talked much, so I'm gonna talk, because I can. But
Can I ask one question first, Mayor?
yes, please.
Sorry, that I think is just relevant to this. In our last discussion, our water director, Justin, was asked about if we do not require secondary, what does that do to the plans for the other lines? If I remember correctly, his comment was that it is the capacities plan for both. If there's no secondary lines, then the culinary would need increased capacity. Is that contemplated in this amendment, et cetera, if we were to remove the secondary requirement?
Justin's coming up.
So if I understand your question correctly, Jared, you're asking, in these costs, is that contemplated that the cost of the increase to the capacity of the culinary system? Are they included here?
No. In the change to the MDA, would we be requiring Olympia to put the increased piping sizes in for the culinary
side?
Yeah, so so we would need to increase the capacity in the culinary system to make up for the deficiency that was created by not having a secondary system. So yes, we would need to increase the culinary size.
Who's paying for that?
Well, I would think that
I think there's
Olympia would, because it's a demand for, it's a project cost, not a
Exactly.
system cost.
So is that contemplated in these numbers?
No.
So
because
it is not.
I just have a comment, because I'd asked the developer about this before, is that they're already upsizing all of their culinary connections throughout Olympia because the pipes that they would be installing for secondary aren't contemplated being
Charged.
and they don't know when it's going to be charged. So they can't install landscaping that might not get water service for 6 or 8 years. So they're already planning to install a full culinary system to serve everything, you know, all the grass, all the open space, all the parks, everything in Olympia.
With culinary.
With culinary. And can you nod and tell me that's correct? So there's no increased cost. It's just a reduction in the duplicate cost.
Can I get some clarity then?
That's my question.
The source and storage.
Yes.
Storage is the other issue.
Would be,
Source and storage, from the information I've received from the developer, does not contemplate that.
pipe size would, but not the storage.
Pipe size on the culinary system, it doesn't make that much of a difference with the amount we're talking about.
Correct.
But the stuff we got from Enzyme does not include the secondary storage in the culinary system today. They're separate.
Storage, on your dime.
Yeah.
So that's not, that cost is not here then. That's still,
Right.
that's not additional
That
cost to the
hasn't
city.
been
that's a-
contemplated yet because we haven't made the decision to go that route yet.
Okay.
But they're not gonna upsize it on their dime.
Well, they're
He has
gonna
to.
have to.
He has to.
meet-
So that's the requirement.
It's to meet
you're
the
gonna-
demands of their system.
Then they have to,
Right.
yes.
And none of that upsizing is being required for any downstream stuff?
Or any,
Would-
They
sorry.
wouldn't have to.
Would we require extra storage for our
But
city
the
capacity?
storage,
Well, so extra capacity?
Yeah, for whatever our city demands. Say their project
So
only,
we may need to upsize the tank for
Correct.
system that the city owns outside of Olympia, right? So we still have those discussions we're having.
An
with them
upsize cost
as
for
far
us,
as paying for our portion of that tank. But the tank would need to be upsized to handle the capacity needs of the secondary if it's not built.
And not on a city dime, though.
so that's the heart of my question is if we go ahead with this amendment, are they going to do that on their dime?
Yes. Correct, yes. Yes, they
I
have
would
to.
say yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a system improvement inside of Olympia, yeah.
Correct.
Correct. I want to point out that the numbers, at least the way I understood this, and I also got it at 3, and I sent it as soon as I got it. The numbers we're showing here is what it would take for us to get water to Olympia. It's not necessarily the cost that they would be spending to put the pipes in the ground. So this would be, how do we get water there? When they're talking about if they cut this or change that, it's kind of separate from these numbers. And they provided some numbers a while back, I think a month or so ago. It was around 7 million is what they anticipated some of their costs. My guess is they would have to net, if they don't put the 7 million in, they have to upsize the culinary. It probably is beneficial to them, but they would be paying that difference because they need the capacity for their development. So it shouldn't impact these numbers if I understand the way the consultants put these numbers together. This is what it would take for us to provide consistent secondary water to that area.
Wouldn't it be almost a cost savings because you're not duplicating the system? You're not having 2 water tanks, not 2 pump stations, 2 pipelines. I think, it might cost
double
$7
the
million.
O&M going forward, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, my turn, right?
I think you can talk now.
Okay. Sherry, I love I love, after our conversation today, you gave me a lot to think about, right? And I went and, did a lot of contemplating today because I was pretty, I thought I knew where I wanted to, vote before that and talking to you, made me do a lot of thinking. But then Justin and, or Blake and, no, it was Justin and Jonathan, happened to come to Nathan's office when I stopped by this afternoon. And again, you throw this out. If I'm a judge right now and I'm saying this came out late, throw this out, right? Throw this out. You're right, it came late. Throw this out. But let's say we even came down to, say, we were just told $2 million. Just even for, say the city costs were $2 million just to go to open space, I just cannot, I can't justify that, even just to open space. I think we can, I just can't get behind that, just for open space. But, and again, I think that's $2,000, $2 million now, but I think, and I'm not looking, I get that there were negotiations 2 years ago. For me, I've got to throw those out, right? I wasn't here, I can't look back on what coulda, woulda, shoulda. Like today, and it's not 2 million, it's gonna end up being more than that.
And it will pay for stuff over.
It's 2 million, this is 20 million.
If it happens, right? If it happens, right? Again, and I get it, Sherry, I know there's different rates, but still the dollar amount today plus the maintenance costs down the road, just to me, just don't, again, I just have to look clean today. I just don't think the expense on the city, I don't care, I truly don't, I'm not worried about how this affects the Olympia, I really don't. This is how this affects the city's bottom line. I would rather focus on secondary to other areas of I think there's gonna be other areas to charge that are priority, that are yards, that are half-acre yards, that are quarter-acre yards. I'd rather, if we get that water, that capacity, I think we'll get a better bang for our buck and ROI going to some of those yards, some of those residential areas, than to some open space in Olympia. And so if I'm saying we're going to prioritize where secondary water goes, to me, it's going to be the last place it goes, in my opinion. I think it should go to neighborhoods like the Ivory development. Like, I think they should, again, we can have a bigger discussion, right? I'm just saying in theory right now, without all the numbers, that's where I want secondary to go, is to the residents. Because I think the city can make steps down the road that are turf. If we go to natural turf, an artificial turf, that in some of these parks, I think there's going to be very little. No, I want grass. I just want it to be fake.
It doesn't belong on windshields, though.
But so that's where I'm at. Like I said, and it's just, if this were even going to, and Sherry, I'll be honest, if this were going to 500 homes, I'm probably a different vote on this. I really am probably a different vote on this if it's going to 500 homes. But it's to open space, and so that's where this changes my opinion on this, is that it's open space. It's not going to residential connections, and nothing will be affected outside of this area. It's a different development with, I would be surprised if we end up with any yards in this that ever need this, would ever qualify for this, right? I would just be, so it's just open space for me.
Not in those zones.
Not
there
in
will
those
be in the
zones.
other zones, but there's no plans for secondary up in those.
Correct. So that's where I would love to find a way still to, if we could find a way to make numbers work, personally, I would love to find a way to make it still work in the city in other areas. So I'm not, to me, this isn't a sign of where I think we should go globally as a city. To me, this is just one development, just open space. I don't think it's worth the expense for the city to go that route. So that's where I'm at. So I think we've belabored this. Any other, I guess we'll look for, I'm just gonna look for motion and we'll let the votes fall where they may, I guess. So I'll just look for motion if anybody wants to make a motion on this.
Motion to approve resolution number R19-2023, approving an amendment to the Olympia Master Development Agreement.
Motion by Steve, second by Teddy. A roll call. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry? No. Teddy?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes, and I'd like to make a comment.
Okay. I'll make a vote yes, and then Jared will go to your, so that motion is approved 4-1. Jared will go to your comment first.
First, I just really appreciate the discussion, the time spent on this. I do think that we should have discussed the overall master plan prior to making this decision, because I think it does affect it. And I would just ask that we have that on future agenda ASAP, because if what I'm concerned about with secondary water is it feasible for the rest of the city or not, right? What are the areas that it is feasible? What are the areas that aren't? Let's figure that out. Toot sweet, and stop requiring people to do things we are never going to be able to provide for them. And then second, just need to make a comment that with this vote and the amendments to this MDA, got some reservations, but I'm putting a lot of faith and trust in John Gust and his partners to help us through some of the opportunities to come. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Jared.
So my comment is just quick. To me, I just feel it's unfortunate because I don't think a lot of this, I think a lot of this discussion would have been good and had in a work meeting hammering through what's really going on in our city with our secondary plan. I was certainly on board with all three of the other amendments to the MDA as long as we got the other one that was discussed prior about the bonding.
We did. I wouldn't have voted.
So I would have been fine with that. And quite frankly, as I've said before, I may have been fine with the secondary thing too, but unfortunately, I didn't get that opportunity. So I don't know where the shortfall is, but I find it unfortunate that we didn't have a more robust discussion on truly how this affects the city as a whole on our secondary water plan. We have a plan in place, and we can call it antiquated if you want. To me, 2012 wasn't very long ago, but maybe some people, Teddy, are younger than I am. It doesn't seem like very long ago to me. But there were decisions made back then based on facts that they had back then, and they felt like it was a good plan, and there were reasons that plan was put in place. I don't know what they are, and I don't know why we would back off on that, because I haven't ever had the opportunity to have the discussion. And so that, and this isn't aimed or directed at anyone. It's certainly not our staff, because I hope every one of you know I very much appreciate all you do. You work your toes off, and every other part of you. But, so I appreciate that. But to me, that, if anything, that was just the part that I needed so I could make a more informed decision, was really understand where we're going, the direction. I don't know if it really was costing $100 million. I have no idea, right? I know that we've had little bits of information that this is probably what this would cost, those kinds of things, but I haven't had a chance to analyze it or feel good about it myself. So it's just disappointing to me that we have to have these kind of conversations. I have to make a decision based on things that I feel like I don't have enough information to make the decision.
And Sherry, I will comment too, it was mentioned today by Jonathan that our consultant, we planned to have it a week before to be in this packet, but jury duty hit. And so but then it was already on the agenda. So I think that process was moving, and again, that's where I didn't take this into account. Truly, this report didn't bear in my decision. I don't think it bared in many of our, so I understand though, so and again, I appreciate the discussion tonight. It's been good. To our staff, again, like you said, just we're short-staffed right now. We are across the board every Monday when I talk to Nathan. We're all I think our whole staff, we're just short-staffed across the board trying to, because we're dealing with some financial challenges. So there's positions we're not filling. Everybody's double dipping and working across, so as Sherry said, we appreciate all you guys do. Jonathan, thank you for staying tonight for your work on this. Blake, Justin, appreciate all you guys do, truly. I know. And these decisions are hard. I think for me, I still struggle separating, because I know some of these, you guys have been working on this stuff. Justin, I know you and I talked, this has been your baby, secondary water's your baby. So I know it's hard not to look at this and look at our decisions as maybe an attack, but truly, we're appreciative of what you do. We really are in support, and I think we want to support all your efforts and give you the tools to, but we want to be like smart decisions that benefit, this community for me, it's financially for years down the road. So thank you for the discussion. Do you dare? Come on up, Ryan. Sure.
I just wanted to make 2 comments. Someday, I'm determined to get your vote, Sherry. So we're going to figure it out. I'm going to work with Nathan. I'm going to create an amendment. I don't know what it's going to be. Maybe I don't know. We'll think it's something cool at this so you can vote for it. That'll be great.
Well, you were 3/4 of the way there this time.
I appreciate that. And my only request is that the mayor continues to wear that medal. I don't even know what it is, but I feel like I'm working with an Olympian, and I just love it. So I like it's red, white, and blue. It just looks good on you. So I'd like you to stay.
If I was an Olympian, I'm trying to think what it would be in.
What sport? Yeah.
I don't know.
Crocheting, basketball,
Yeah,
underwater basketball.
it's not, because I'm not athletic, so. It's from it's from the hockey team tonight. From our state championship.
Underwater Jenga.
Thank you, everybody, on this, and I appreciate the discussion. Like I said, this was not an easy, and Sherry, I appreciate all your points. I know I get it, and I do. We'll move on to item 10.1. Public hearing and consideration of a resolution approving amendments to the Harriman City Master Fee Schedule. Kyle.
Sorry, Kyle, this is going to be a letdown for you at this point.
Hopefully this will be a much lighter discussion, hopefully.
Well, seeing as how there's not a lot of public for the public hearing.
We'll see what public comment we get. So as we discussed at the end of February during our work session, the Associate Director of Parks and Recreation had recommended some adjustments to the fee schedule for our cemetery. These fees mirror the ones that Riverton currently charges. I will also mention that we are adding fees for opening and closing for double stack, and then the weekends, holidays is the same differential we have with a regular opening closing, but that fee is the Riverton fee. In addition, we didn't discuss, the engineering department wanted me to add a micro trenching fee. Normally, these type of requests would wait till the next time we do major fee schedule amendments, but they're getting a number of requests, so they wanted to expedite getting a fee put on the fee schedule to accommodate that. And with that, are there any questions before the public hearing?
Any questions or comments for Kyle?
Does that micro-trenching fee fit other jurisdictions or in line with other areas?
Yeah, we surveyed, I think, 3 other jurisdictions nearby. This was the same as South Jordan's, which was right in the middle. We're actually just bid out for a new fee study, and we have Lewis Young Birmingham was awarded that contract. So they'll be redoing the fee study, and so this will be updated, and it might stay the same. We don't know yet, but this was right in the middle of where the other jurisdictions were at.
And we got a policy in place for replacing the asphalt and everything to spec and.
Okay, we have a standard.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kyle. We'll go to a public hearing. At this point, we'll open that public hearing.
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing, or do you have to only make a motion to close?
To close it. I was looking at that too, though, so you're not the only one that. Any comments? Okay, I look for a motion to close the public hearing.
Well, I'll do that. Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion by Sherry.
Second.
Second by Steve. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any other comments, discussion?
No, I appreciate the effort and work it goes into analyzing all of these. That's a long fee schedule. But as we've talked about shortfalls in my other comments, I think it's important that we're reviewing these and updating these perhaps a little more often than just periodically, there should be some kind of a systematic way that we're reviewing and updating these appropriately, especially on things that aren't covering our costs.
And I'll just add that most of these have to do with the cemetery fees, and it's a terrible time in most people's lives when they're having to bury people, and then when the cost gets slapped in your face, it's really difficult. So there was a lot of contemplation going into these fees, and again, like Steve said, it's just simply to try and cover costs. We tried, you'll notice, really hard to make sure we didn't bump up to what even other areas were on our resident fee. We tried to keep that as low as possible because we want our residents to have the opportunity to be buried here and at a minimal cost. Obviously, our non-residents, we bump that up more because we want to preserve, and I believe that's part of the reason we did it, is to try and preserve opportunities for our residents to be buried here. Anyway.
Agree. Thank you. Okay, I'll look for a motion then.
Your turn, Teddy.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number R20-2023, approving amendment to the Harriman City Master Fee Schedule.
I'll second.
Motion by Teddy, second by Steve. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Teddy?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, that motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Future meetings, next Planning Commission meeting next Wednesday, 7 o'clock. Next City Council meeting 2 weeks from tonight, April 26th at 7 o'clock as well. Events, our spring cleanup at Butterfield, correct? At Butterfield begins next Monday through Friday. Hungry Harriman, we've started that now every Monday night out front here.
The weather was amazing on Monday.
Thank goodness we're not doing it tomorrow. It's going to snow tomorrow again.
Maybe.
Okay, we do have a closed. I've been notified we do have a closed. So per our training this morning, I'm going to look for a motion to go into closed that will be held in the council Fort Harriman conference room. Those attending will be the council, city attorney, city manager, assistant city manager, recorder, Blake. Anybody else? Anybody else?
And Jonathan.
And John. No. I learned that in my training tonight. I've never done that.
Very good.
Man, I'm getting good at this. Just in time to be done.
Good job.
Okay,
Motion to temporarily recess the city council meeting to convene in closed session for the purpose to discuss pending or reasonable imminent litigation in the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property as provided by Utah Codes annotated section 52-4-205.
Motion by Steve.
Second.
Second by Sherry. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry? Yes. Teddy?
Yes.
Jared?
Yeah.
And I'll vote yes, that motion carries. Well, moved into closed. Thank you, everybody.
Now, if you're in the room, you're going into closed, do you have to announce it? You just start at the same time?
Well, you just say that the closed meeting will be held